Okay, everybody. So this could be lesson 4. Okay. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about changing the context of our mind. So we're going to change basically the context from which we think. So there's a slow way to do that and a faster way to do that. So, an author that I read sometimes is Neville Goddard, and he always used to say, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, which just basically means, see the vision that you want to create, and how would you feel if that was already a reality for you, and live from that place, right? So it's the whole difference from we'll say like actually living from living from the end in mind versus thinking of what you want. Instead of like thinking of your goal, you're living from your goal as if it already happened. All right. So, in order to do that, we need to change our mindset, the context from which we think. So, let's say this is us, or let's say this is, let's use Napoleon Hill, for example. Napoleon Hill took 20 years of his life to go and study, the top wealthiest men, in the earlier part of the century, right? And then he spent 20 years putting together a philosophy of success. He wrote some books like The Law of Success and Think and Grow Rich and a bunch of other ones. And over 20 years, and with all that knowledge, he came up with a book, right? So let's say this is his book, and that took 20 years to create. But we can just go down to Chapters and just go buy the book for $20, and we got the book, and then we can download it on Audible and listen to it or read it and get through it in like 8 hours, right? And we can get through the whole book. And as we're reading it, the more we get into the book, the more the book gets into us. So this whole philosophy and everything that's written from it, because when you read a book, you're really reading the philosophy of the author who wrote it. The mindset that he was in, from which he wrote the book, and this starts to get into your head, and then you're thinking from that philosophy, not just reading that philosophy. This book gets in, the whole mindset of stuff starts to get into your brain, and this becomes your context then, right? The way that you think, and you're thinking from that whole philosophy of the books that you're reading. That being said, what is how does that make a difference for us, and how does that how can what's the applicable point for that? Well, basically, we can read a book a lot and spend a year reading it and stuff, and we can install that philosophy in it by thinking about the concepts and practicing the concepts, and thinking from that philosophy a lot quicker than it took that philosophy to be written, because that book took 20 years to write, and the people that were interviewed to create that content also spent their whole lifetime in developing strategies and learning what worked for success, and those habits and those mindsets and stuff are put in the book. So instead of taking, like, say, a whole lifetime to create, lifetimes really, of many people, and then Napoleon Hill spending 20 years to study all those, the end result of what those people, told him about that. Instead of taking all that time, you just go to get the book for cheap, read it, until that philosophy starts to become your mindset and the context from which you think. And how that makes a difference is when you change your mindset and you learn something new, it's gonna change how you view things. So, for example, Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He's got a story in there. If you read it, he talks about he was in a train or something like that, and this guy had all these kids running around, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you shut your kids up or something, right, or control them and stuff?" And then the guy's like, "Yeah, I should and stuff, but their mother just died like half an hour ago, and I don't really know how to control them, and I don't really know what to do myself, and they don't know what to do, and with that context, it changed how he perceived the situation, and that kind of gave him compassion. So the same sort of thing can be, like you said, if a person's learning how to drive a car, as long as they put like like some sort of note on the back saying "new driver," that changes the context, and you give the person more leeway. If they're not changing lanes properly or whatever, you just don't get mad automatically because your context has changed. So when we're changing our context, it changes how we perceive situations. That's going to change how we feel and how we respond to different situations, right? We can respond positively versus, react unconsciously, negatively. We can respond positively, consciously to stuff because we change our mindset and we change the context from which we view things, because context really creates content, what content is, right? For example, like I grew up before McMurray, so it was always like minus 40. I came here, and then I moved, and then it's warmer where I live now. But when it's like minus 10 and stuff, when I first moved here, I was like, oh, this isn't, minus 10 isn't really cold compared to where I live. But if you're from here or from somewhere where it's really sunny, minus 10 is really chilly. So it depends what context you're coming from, which is going to, decipher how you're going to interpret any given neutral thing, right? That just is outside of, how you're perceiving it, in contrast to better or worse or something like that. So anyways, it's going to change how you perceive stuff. All right. So it's going to do that. And then also when you learn more, you can also do more, right? So when we become aware of more stuff, you're going to start to see more opportunities and options. Like people that buy houses all the time, they're going to be, their reticular activating system, their RAS, is going to be more prone to see stuff that that other people wouldn't be aware of. Other people are going to miss opportunities. So changing your context is going to, ignite your part of your brain that's going to see opportunities where other people would miss it. RAS is just like, reticular activating system. It's basically just, if you buy a new car, you're going to see that car everywhere. So that's part of that as well. I'm just going to cross off things as I go over them. There was a show when I was a kid called MacGyver, and he would make, without resources, he would be resourceful, and he could make like, bombs out of gum or whatever, and that adds to it, right? You know more, you can do more, you can be resourceful in the midst of, or you can be, have resourcefulness in the midst of lack of resources. So you got that. And so we've got that. And then to change that, I'll just give an example of, the late Bob Proctor. He read the book Think and Grow Rich for 20 years, and he just kept reading it over and over again. And what happens is if you read a book over and over again, it might look like you're just reading the same thing, but you're always going to get more out of it. When you first start reading a book, you have no context of what the book's talking about. So as you start reading it, you're coming from your context that you already have, which might have no idea what the book's talking about, right? So you're only going to pick up a little bit, the pieces that you can already relate to. But as you go through the whole book, after picking up more, the second time through the book, you've already read the whole book and you're reading again for the second time with that whole context of the book because you already read it through once. And that's going to allow you to pick up more and more the second time you go through it. So it's kind of like, if you're looking down on a person going around in a circle, reading the same thing over and over again, it doesn't look like they're getting anywhere. But, 3D wise, they're always expanding, higher and higher from a higher perspective. They're actually expanding in their awareness and they're picking up more. It's kind of the same sort of thing as if you got a snowball, creating a snowman and stuff, you're rolling it down the hill. Every time you keep rolling it, on the path, it's going to get bigger and bigger. It's going to keep picking up more and more stuff. And as we keep reading stuff over and over again, our minds can start to perceive stuff that it couldn't perceive the first time because there's different levels of let's say wisdom in books that you can't pick up when you're 5 years old. And then if you've been reading a lot of books and stuff like that, your mind starts to put together different concepts, and you'll get like a lot more out of it later, right? So like I used to watch Three's Company when I was a kid, and there was a lot of innuendos that just went right over my head. I didn't pick it up. When I was older, I went back to watch the same thing, and I picked up a whole lot more out of the show that I totally missed the first time, right? So we grow in consciousness. The thing that we're trying to do here is grow our awareness, create a larger context from which we can perceive things differently, feel differently, when things happen, because our perception really causes our emotions, right? How we perceive things, good or bad and stuff. It increases our ability to act and to act on opportunities that we'd otherwise miss. Increases our ability to be, resourceful and have resourcefulness in the lack of resources. And yeah, it basically allows us to think from, the end result, as in like this book here is the end result of a whole bunch of people putting their knowledge down of what they learned, when they were growing, successful and stuff. And we embody that knowledge in our mind, right now. We don't have to go through those lifetimes that were needed in order to create all these, books and all this wisdom that other people have to spend 20 years putting together into a philosophy. We can just get the book and start reading it and then live from that place right now without having spent a lifetime to get that knowledge, right? So we want to think from this place now, and it's and that's kind of what we're going to talk about, thinking from a future that we want to create, thinking from a philosophy of success that other people took years to create. Do that now and live from now towards your goal with that philosophy in place, because otherwise you're going to like miss a whole bunch of stuff on your way up the mountain, right? Let's say you go all the way up the mountain, and in the process of getting up the mountain, you start to learn things. And the second time you go up the mountain, you're aware of a whole bunch of, diamonds that you missed the first time. You're aware of a whole bunch of, plants and birds that missed the whole time. You grew aware of these things in the process of getting up the mountain, but that took time. But if you read a book that points out all this stuff before you start, you're going in with an awareness of what this stuff looks like, and your mind is already aware of it. Because otherwise your mind just has like scotoma. It basically blocks out everything that is non-essential to what you need to pay attention to. That's why you want to activate your RAS by reading material of stuff that you want to become aware of. And this here is kind of like a accumulation of what the end result that you might want to get to, that people have already got there, and you want to start with that inside your mind and change your mindset so it changes the context from what you think. And that's part of living from an end result versus thinking of the end result. You want to read a book so much that get in the book so much that the book gets inside you and you think from it, not of it. Okay, thanks.